Claire Fox, who's director of the Academy of Ideas. It's a forum committed to open and robust public debate. Good morning to you, Claire.
Good morning.
I suppose the real issue, I mean, for me, over Boris Johnson, I couldn't care less about Boris Johnson's leadership ambitions. On balance, I'd rather he didn't become leader of the Tory party or become the Prime Minister of this country, given his abilities when it came as Foreign Secretary. But the big issue, really, it also isn't even about what a tiny percentage of women of the Muslim faith choose to wear over their heads or not. Really, this has become a row over freedom of speech and what you can and what you can't say before someone starts shouting either the R word, racism at you, or I word, Islamophobia at you, and starts threatening you with either police action or disciplinary procedures or losing your job. Is this for you an issue about freedom of speech or about what women wear?
I think it's become a debate about freedom of speech because it was so ironic that so many people reacted to an article which it seems to me very few people have read, which actually argues in defence of women wearing whatever they want. That's what I can't get over in relation to Boris's article. I'm not a great fan of his, but he said that he was opposed to the ban of the burka or the niqab in Denmark. It was a betrayal of their spirit of liberty as a country. We shouldn't go down that road. Women should be able to wear what they want. He then, in order to make the point, said they should be able to wear what they want. I happen to hate this particular garment, and then made the comments that he did. And immediately he was pantsed on from a great height, and the words racism and Islamophobia were used. And then there was the whole investigation, and this is far too offensive for somebody to write. And so it became a freedom of speech issue then. And all of this stuff about, Boris was playing a clever game in order to draw attention to dog whistle, of course, assuming that we're all kind of reading the Telegraph and we're all ready to rush out and kind of launch an anti-Muslim pogrom as we speak. But actually, if you read the article, then you'd actually think, oh, now I'm going to support the right to wear whatever you want and not ban the burqa. So if saying that gets you dubbed a racist, then basically it's a broader message to us all to watch what we say, walk on eggshells, and be very careful about upsetting certain faiths, and I think that's very dangerous.
And that's it. And it is specifically around certain faiths. But, again, Life of Brian, of course, an upset, of course, when it was released many decades ago, attack on Christianity, but mocking Christianity. But that's mocking Christianity. And in fact, pretty much any other religion is now considered to be sort of just part of British culture and humour. Absolutely not when it comes to Islam. Now, there are concerns, of course, when you're talking about a group that is a small minority in a country. It's a different sort of power balance, isn't it? But we are getting to a stage, the impression I'm certainly getting from people's reactions in the polls, what people are saying online about this whole row, is that there are a lot of British people of all faiths, of all creeds, of all ethnicities, of all backgrounds, of all classes, who are saying they've had enough of being told what they can and they can't say. And they've had enough of having, particularly the R word, racism, thrown at them whenever they say anything that's not completely, fully ingrained with sort of politically correct gender or identity politics or whatever. And that there is a bit of a backlash. Do you think that he has actually tapped into something? And people say he's tapped into dog whistle racism. I would say he's just tapped into a British urge to protect free speech. And do you believe that the British history of and principles of free speech are under attack, or is this all just a complete storm in a teacup?
Well, people will say it's not a free speech issue. It's because he said it, and it's particularly the way he said it. But of course, that sends the message that, only certain people are allowed to comment or allowed fair comment. And also, it's partly the fact that he's, white, male and stale, and that he's a powerful person. But I think...
he's middle-aged, white, posh, and man. He's not allowed to comment on anything anymore.
And on that basis, I think that one thing that we ought to be clear about, the majority of Muslims have not made a fuss about this. This has actually come from a very small... if you want, it's the kind of chattering classes who've got into a state about it. When you've got kind of broadcasters going all over, the country, interviewing women who are wearing the niqab or the burqa and saying, do you know somebody's been horrible about you and compared you to a letterbox or compared you to a bank robber? And then they say, oh, that's not very nice. And then people say, look, it's terrible. Look what's happening. In other words, it's been completely kind of talked up. And that's how it becomes a freedom of speech issue. Many women who are Muslims have been fighting and arguing against the burqa and the niqab for some time. It's not a demand put by the Quran or any kind of religious diktat. And so I only make those points because the fact that when somebody writes an article, it can be turned into such a you can't say that story, it does mean that the rest of us are left in a position of feeling that we're being told to shut up, to not ask awkward questions. And although, there's a particular issue here, we do know that there are issues that we might want to discuss in relation to any religion and obviously in relation to Islam, because precisely we've been told we can't. So we've had a problem, and we have a problem in Europe of radical Islam and with devastating, brutal consequences. And if you think about the Charlie Hebdo issue, that was precisely a situation in Paris, a satirical magazine, where they mocked and made fun of aspects of Islam.
Along with every other religion and every other powerful organisation.
Yes, indeed, but they were actually butchered on the street as a consequence of the fact that they were offensive in relation to one religion. And we all went on the streets, metaphorically speaking, with a Je suis Charlie badges on, saying, this cannot be allowed. You should be able to say whatever you want, mock whatever religion you want, and so on and so forth. We defended them. But we seem to have forgotten that message, because actually we should not exactly be saying Je suis Boris, but we should recognise that this is an attack on all of us. When he's attacked.
The interesting thing, of course, is everyone said everyone should be free to publish a cartoon of Prophet Muhammad and not have their heads chopped off or be blown up. And yet no British magazine or newspaper or media outlet has done that, because they all fear exactly that, which is very telling.
And we've also been in a situation, and we can't duck away from this, where there's been instances around the country we've now discovered where officials who work for councils and social services were rather anxious and nervous about being accused of racism should they draw attention to what they knew to be organised sexual abuse of young women, because
Rotherham, Rochdale, elsewhere, yeah.
Exactly, because those abuses were of a particular ethnicity stroke faith, and there was a kind of anxiousness and caution. So what you get into a situation is there's an atmosphere that you can't say certain things, and that is bad for all of us in society. And you ask if there's a backlash against it. I think people are fed up of being told they can't say that. I do think millions of people do feel as though there's a certain words, certain issues that are kind of verboten, certain issues are taboo, you're not allowed to discuss them. That does not lead to a healthy, democratic, open debate.
We should be able to discuss anything. Well, look, let me put this to you. The Muslim Council of Britain is writing a letter to Theresa May today. It's on the front page of The Guardian, and they're demanding that Boris Johnson is subject to a full disciplinary inquiry. We understand he's already facing that anyway. They are saying he shouldn't be allowed to get away with victimising minorities, and they are claiming that they said they want no whitewashing. They say they should not be allowed to victimise minorities with impunity, and they say that data from Tell Mama, which monitors anti-Muslim incidents, and these are obviously self-reporting, not necessarily gone to the police and not necessarily witnessed, but they showed a rise in abuse directed at women wearing niqabs and hijabs, just the headscarf, since Boris Johnson's column was published a week ago. If there has been a rise in abuse or attacks on Muslim women as a result of, since Boris Johnson wrote his column, should Boris Johnson take responsibility for that?
I don't think he should, actually, because first of all, you have to write things that you believe to be true, and you have to then throw them out into the public square. The interesting thing about this abuse, and of course it's horrible if people are going around saying to people, you're a letterbox, or you're, which appears to be, by the way, the nature of the abuse. Mm-hmm. It's unpleasant and it's rude, and people shouldn't do it. But it's not, when they say there's a rise of abuse, it's always kind of an hate crime. There's always a fear that people are being physically assaulted, but it seems that some people are wandering around calling people names. which is a horrible thing to do, but it's also not quite as dramatic as is implied. Now, the other thing is that what caused that? It's arguably been caused by the unholy furore about a column which didn't say what people think it said. The interesting thing is that my view is Boris Johnson writes a column. People should read it. They should chat about it with their mates in the pub if they want. They should think about it, argue against it, but they should not turn it into a national crisis that allows the Prime Minister to stop reprimanding Boris Johnson, inquiries left, right and centre. In other words, this has been blown out of all proportion. Most people would not have known what was in that column were it not for the furore against it.
And again, if he's being blamed for women being shouted at or abused for wearing the burka or the niqab or indeed just the headscarf, the hijab, when he was actually writing a whole article defending their right to wear it, we are in a very, very, very strange state of affairs.